During this month of Ramadan, we have a heightened sense of awareness. We're really focused on things that are around us and what might invalidate our fast. And that heightened sense of awareness is making us look at what we're eating, because we don't want to be eating during Ramadan. It will break our fast. What we're drinking, we're not drinking anything during Ramadan because it will, during the daylight hours, because it would break our fast. And so this is creating that heightened sense of awareness. And we're looking at what our intake is. So during this time, when we have the blessing of this month and we have that heightened sense of awareness, I encourage us all, and I encourage myself first and foremost, to really look at our food intake. Is what we are eating halal and tayyib, or are there rooms for us to improve on our food intake and make sure that we're eating a pure diet and a healthy diet? Now, in the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word halal and tayyib, halal being permissible and tayyib literally meaning good, the Quranic use of these two words is actually the same thing. So when Allah tells us in the Quran to eat from the tayyibat, from the good things, it's the same as saying from the halal things. So they mean the same. But conventionally, the way a lot of people use them is they use the terms to distinguish between those things that are purely permissible and those things that are good for you. So there might be something that technically is permissible for us to eat, but it's not necessarily good for us to eat. As an example, processed sugars and candy and sweets and desserts and so forth. If there's no ingredient that is a haram ingredient, it's permissible for us to eat. But the next question should be is, should I be consuming this? Or if we take it to another level, the consumption of meat. In the modern world, there's an industrialization of meat, and the meat intake of the world is very high, and it's higher than it's ever been, and it's not natural, and it's harming the animals that are involved in that process, and it's harming the earth and the farms that are producing that. So we should ask ourselves, just because this animal was slaughtered properly and it was made halal, should I really be eating this? Should I be consuming as much meat as I am doing? We know the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ consumed meat, so consumption of meat is permissible and it's accepted and as a practice, a prophetic practice, and so we should have some meat consumption. But to allow for ourselves to be consuming meat all the time and harm animals and harm the environment, those are questions that we should be asking ourselves. So during this month of Ramadan, let's ask ourselves, is what I am eating, is that the best thing? So let's not just stop at, is it halal, is it haram question. Let's ask the question, let's raise the standards. Let's have a higher ethical question and a higher ethical standard that we place on ourselves in saying, should I be eating this? Is this the most healthy thing? So it's a time, this month is not only a time of worship, but it's a time to get into good habits and look at what our food intake is, and are we eating the best things for ourselves, for the environment. This is a question that we could be asking during Ramadan, but really we should be asking throughout the year. It's just that during this month we have this heightened sense of awareness. We're looking at things. We're making sure that what we take in to our bodies is not preventing us from worship. Because when we consume things that are haram, we know that affects our worship. There's a tradition, a saying, some ascribe it as a hadith, others say that it's not a prophetic hadith, but the saying is sound nonetheless, and it is that whoever eats the halal will obey Allah whether he likes it or not, whether he or she likes it or not. And whoever eats the haram food, the prohibited food, they will disobey Allah whether they like it or not. And what it means is that when we eat things that are permissible, it actually facilitates and makes easier our worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of God. And when we eat things that are not permissible, it makes transgressions that much easier. So let's look at what we're taking into our body. If it might be something that, even though some scholars say it's permissible, but other scholars say that it's not, let's start avoiding doubtful matters. Let's try to avoid doubtful matters as much as we can. Definitely during this month, but also trying to carry that over throughout the rest of the month. So we're working on leaving haram food as much as we are, as to the best of our ability. we're working also on leaving those doubtful things, things that we're not sure whether it's halal or haram, or whether there's a difference of opinion amongst the jurists and the scholars on whether or not this is a permissible ingredient. And then we're asking the question, is this tayyib in the sense, the modern use of the sense, is this something that's good for me? Is this something that is good for the environment? And we're asking those questions so that we're not just consuming. One of the interesting things is that the Salaf, the pious predecessors, those first few generations after the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, their food consumption, their overall food consumption would actually go down during Ramadan. And the alarming thing is that in the Muslim world today, food imports and exports actually increase during the month of Ramadan. So it has been turned into a month of feasting. And in this process of mass consumptions, we might not have the time to really look at the details of what it is that we're consuming and what is the impact of this. If you're not, as an example, if you're not aware of blood chocolate as a term, look it up and look at the chocolate that we consume, and are we supporting oppressive methods in West Africa where actually modern day slavery, literally, children are bought and sold for $300 or $400 to produce chocolate. Is our consumption of chocolate impacting that? Or are we going to now protest that by keeping our dollars back and not purchasing that and demanding ethical production of chocolate as just one example? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala show us truth as it truly is and allow us to follow it, and may Allah show us falsehood as it truly is and allow us to avoid it. Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqan warzuqna ittiba'a wa arina al-batila batilan warzuqna ijtinaba. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.